This week, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte cleared a significant hurdle on the path to becoming the next Secretary-General of NATO. He now looks almost certain to take over as leader of the military alliance when current head Jens Stoltenberg steps down in October. Deutsche Welle correspondent Arthur Sullivan joins us now from Berlin. Hi there. Why was this week so significant for Rutte's ambitions to become the next Secretary-General of NATO?
So Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, has been the clear front runner for months because he's been backed by the leading NATO allies such as the US, the UK, France and Germany. But there was some potential obstacles, and that was primarily the opposition of Hungary's Eurosceptic Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Now, Orban has, of course, maintained quite close ties with Moscow throughout the war in Ukraine, and both Rutte and Orban have had quite a stormy relationship during their times meeting at the EU table during their tenures at the helm of their country's governments. But the reason this week was so important is because Rutte did a deal with Orban whereby Orban agreed he would support him as the leader of NATO if he would allow Hungary to opt out of NATO activities which supported Ukraine. So that deal basically paves the way for Rutte, and at the same time Slovakia, another country which is led by Eurosceptic populists with pro-Moscow leanings, they also said they would support Rutte. That meant that the only person standing in his way was the Romanian President Klaus Iohannis, who also wanted to run for the role of Secretary-General of NATO, but he hadn't picked up any support, and the fact that Hungary and Slovakia rode in behind Rutte meant that he had to effectively pull out of the race, and that means that Rutte now has unanimous support. He's the only candidate in the race, and he's now guaranteed to be the next Secretary-General.
OK, what sort of figure is he?
Well, he's been leading the Netherlands since 2010 as Prime Minister, so he's hugely experienced, and he's actually the longest serving Prime Minister in the country's history. And the fact that he has stayed in power for so long really is testament to his personality, his general likability and his considerable political skills, because he's survived a number of political scandals in that time. He's actually earned the nickname Teflon Mark. He's led 4 different government coalitions. He's worked with various political parties of all sorts of stripes, both right and left. The centre-right party he leads isn't even that large, and yet he still is always been seen as the obvious candidate to lead. He's even managed to maintain reasonably cordial relations with the Netherlands' far-right leader, Geert Wilders. So Dutch politics is very consensus-driven. That's quite similar to the kind of decision-making process that NATO requires. So it's quite easy to see why he has won so much support. That ability to get along with people, to manage people of different backgrounds politically, it's obviously what's going to serve him well at NATO. And the other thing is he's been a consistent champion of Ukraine and its fight against Russia, which is a key prerequisite for any aspiring leader. But perhaps the biggest challenge for Rutte at NATO is going to be managing the transatlantic relationship between the European members and NATO's most important member, which of course is the US. And the prospect of Donald Trump returning to the White House has made some in NATO worry about the future of that alliance. But crucially, Rutte has himself cultivated quite strong relations with Trump. And during Trump's presidency, Rutte earned the nickname the Trump Whisperer for his ability to keep Trump on side during tense moments. And if Trump returns to the White House, he may well need those skills at the helm of NATO.
So, Arthur, what still has to happen before he's formally named?
Well, he's going to take over officially from the outgoing Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg on October 1st. That's when his term ends after 10 years in charge. And the formal process, it's quite sort of diplomatic formalities at this stage. So the NATO ambassadors to the various member states, they're going to meet next week in an informal sort of traditional gathering known as the Dean's Coffee. And that's where the so-called Dean, that's the longest serving ambassador to NATO, in this case it's the Croatian ambassador, they will confirm consensus for Rutte. And then early next month there's a very large NATO summit taking place in Washington, D.C. to mark the alliance's 75th anniversary. That's going to be a big event for NATO, and it's going to be Rutte's first chance to meet the members as its next leader. Now, he is still the caretaker Prime Minister in the Netherlands, but he's due to step down next month as a new government takes place, and then he'll have a couple of months to unwind and get himself ready for this next role as the Secretary-General.
Arthur Sullivan, thank you. The actor Donald Sutherland, who starred in The Hunger Games and MASH, has died.